Hello everyone, I am Mayank Arora, Faculty of Journalism Mass Communication Department from Tecnia Institute of Advanced Study. Today I deliver my lecture on the topic of types of photography. Portrait photography, which is also called more often than not, portrait is the art of capturing a subject, in this case a person or a group of people, in which the facial feature as well as facial expressions are made predominant. What portrait photographers or portraiture photographers aim is to focus on the person face. They aim to give emphasis on the face of the person because this will not be the focus on the emphasis of the photograph. This does not mean, however, the person body or even the background, which is no longer be included under portrait photography. These can still be included in the photo by the portrait photographer, but again the focus or the emphasis should be on the person face, facials, expressions and even distinct facial features. One of the common misconceptions about portrait photography is that it is but a snapshot or a photograph of a person. This is not true. In portrait photography or portraiture, a composed or rehearsed image of a person in a still position is captured. This basically means that the portrait photographers would brief the subject and the subject would have a specific position and angles. Of course, the rehearsals and all the details around it should be discussed between the subject and portrait photographers beforehand. Usually portraiture involves the subject. Again, in this case, the person to be take a photo of looking directly into the portrait photographer's camera. In the early days, all of the subject in portraitures looked into the lens of the portrait photographer's camera. These days, however, many portrait photographers as well as subject of these portraitures experiment. Many now had portraits wherein they do not directly look at the camera. Some also have distinct angle that they won't capture. That's why they sit in a specific position in front of the camera as well. Again, these new and recent style in portraiture photography are based on the portrait photographer's tips and recommendations and more importantly based on the preference of the subject. Unlike other photographer styles, the subject of portrait photography or portraiture are often non-professional models. This means that ordinary people such as father, mother and their kid, businessmen and even the local man on the street can be subject in portraitures. There are no boundaries or rules when it comes to portrait photography. Truth be told that what makes portrait photography easy and difficult at the same time. Easy because just about anybody with a point and shoot camera can do a portraiture, but difficult because when you need a professional portrait taken, you must rely on the professional portrait photographers. More on this later in this article. There are 4 essential approaches when it is come to portrait photography or portraiture. First one is the constructive, second one is candid approach, third one environmental approach and the last the creative approach. For the constructive approach, this is where the portrait photographer builds a certain emphasis for the total look of portrait. For instance, the photographer with the consent of the subject of course would develop an idea around the portrait, smiling, happy, couple for one, a confident new graduate and honest looking business executive, a blushing bride who so eager to start her new life. These are just a few of the ideas that a portrait photographer can work on when developing a photo taken with the constructive approach in mind. The environmental approach, on the other hand, depicts the subject in their surrounding or environment. For instance, in their workplace, a portrait can take of the subject being in his office with a photo of his country's president or of his favorite global leader as background. Thirdly, the candid approach. This is where the subject is photographed without his or her knowledge, hence carried on. One could most probably say that this is the informal type of portrait photography since the subject does not look at the camera directly. However, a lot of portrait photographers like to use this approach or at its level inventive and can really capture a certain emotion. Lastly, the creative approach is where digital manipulation is included in the process. The end result usually is a magical, very attractive and visually appealing portrait. Second one is wildlife photography. Wildlife photography is a generic of photography concerned with documenting various forms of wildlife in their natural habitat. It is one of the more challenging form of photography as well as requiring sound technical skills such as being able to expose correctly. Wildlife photographers generally need good field craft skills. For example, some animals are difficult to approach and thus the knowledge of the animal behavior is needed in order to able to predict its action. Photographing some specifics may require stalking skills or the use of a hide blind of concealment. While wildlife photograph can be taken using basic equipment, successful photography of some types of wildlife requires specialist equipment such as macro lenses for insect, long focal length for the birds and underwater camera for the marine life. However, a great wildlife photographer can also be the result of being in the right place at the right time. The next one is commercial photography. Commercial photographers take photos of building, models, merchandise, artifacts and landscape. They are used for promotional purpose in books, reports, advertisement and catalogs. For example, commercial photographs typically are used entirely in the retail and wholesale sectors in the sales material for the promotion efforts. In commercial photographs, the entire photo shoot is devoted to the product being photographed. The lighting, styling and background generally are somewhat natural or as not to detract from the product being promoted. The next one is advertising photography. The world of advertising photography is broader than the narrow array of the techniques and used in commercial photography. The advertising photographer used a wide variety of photographs to sell not only products but lifestyles, concepts and ideas. The advertising photographer has greater creative freedom to interpret how products, services, lifestyle and ideas can be presented photographically. Advertising photographers are often expert at marketing, layout, business management and sales trend, and estimate 80% of the all advertising campaigns use photography as in 2011 according to goldprints.com. Commercial and advertising photography tools. Commercial and advertising photographers need the latest tools and technology to remain competitive. This includes a digital single lens release camera with multiple lenses. Both areas of photography required a good zoom lenses and a fast wide angle lens necessary for a broad array of photo shoot. A fast lens has a larger maximum aperture and a faster shutter speed, which give the photographer greater creative control. The professional, commercial and advertising photographers need a good tripod, portable lighting fixture and umbrellas and a few essential filters to control glare. Professional, commercial and advertising photographers need to keep up to date on what corporations are using in their presentation and sales campaigning to remain competitive. Commercial and advertising photography management. An estimate 70 to 75% of a commercial and advertising photographers' work is selling and managing images. As opposed to taking pictures, photographic software is necessary to manage and touch up a high volume of commercial and advertising photographs. Most commercial and advertising photographs work with Adobe Photoshop and the companion program Adobe Lightroom to process large volume of images quickly, which is essential as a working professional. Unlike landscape and other form of photograph, commercial and advertising photography requires nearly perfect images achieved with the touch-up features in photographic editing software. Commercial and advertising photographic image must enlarge effectively to a poster or billboard size for promotional purpose. The next one is night photography. Night photography refers to photographer taken outdoors between dusk and dawn. Night photographers generally have a choice between using artificial light and using a long exposure, exposing the scene of seconds, minutes and even hours in order to give the film or digital sensor enough time to capture a usable images. With the process of high-speed film, higher sensitive digital image sensor, wide aperture lenses and the ever greater power to urban lights, night photography is increasingly possible using available light, techniques and equipment. The following techniques and equipments are generally used in night photography. First one is a tripod is usually necessary due to long exposure time. Alternatively, the camera may be placed on a steady flat object, example a table or a chair, low wall, windowsill, etc. Second one is a shutter release cable or self timer is almost always used to prevent camera shake when the shutter is released. Next one, manual focus. Since autofocus system usually operate poorly in low light condition, Never digital camera incorporate a live view mode, which often allows very accurate manual focusing. A stopwatch or remote timer to time very long exposure where the camera's bulb setting is used. A camera lens with a wide aperture, preferably one with a physical element that can minimize chroma. Long exposure and multiple flashes. The long exposure multiple flashes technique is a method of night or low light photography which used a mobile flash unit to expose various parts of a building or interior using a long exposure. The technique is often combined with using color gels in front of the flash unit to provide different colors in order to illuminate the subject in different ways. It is also common to flash the unit several times during the exposure while swapping the colors of the gels around to mix color on the final photo. This requires some skills and a lot of imagination since it is not possible to see how the effect will turn out until the exposure is complete. By using this technique, the photographer can illuminate specific part of the subject in different colors, creating shadow in ways which would not normally be possible. So I hope you understand my lecture for the topic of types of photography. Thank you very much.